I'm Laura Paskus. New Mexicans are facing some potentially big changes when it comes to our electrical utility. That's because there's a merger being worked out between PNM Resources and Avangrid, the U.S. subsidiary of a Spanish power company. How that will play out and what the consequences might be remain to be seen. But I checked in recently with Caitlin Andrews, a reporter for the Bangor Daily News. Avangrid has been in Maine for more than a decade, and the company has not been without controversy. So here in New Mexico, there's a planned multi-billion-dollar merger between PNM Resources and Avangrid. PNM has operated as a monopoly the state's electric utility for decades, and Avangrid is the U.S.-based subsidiary of a Spanish power company. Now, this is all still playing out here in New Mexico, but in Maine, in 2008, Avangrid bought Central Maine Power. When the company was coming to Maine, what are some of the things that they promised? And Caitlin, what have people seen happen over the past 14 years?
Well, I guess I should say to start, the way that it actually came about was that Iberdrola bought Energy East, which Central Maine Power was a subsidy of in 2008. And then in 2015, Iberdrola bought this other company called UIL Holdings. They merged them together in their network division, which created Avangrid. So Avangrid was birthed in 2015, and CMP just ended up being something underneath that. And I believe the idea was that, merging them together would create more reliability, would create more dependable customer services, and it would create a stronger utility altogether. And some of the challenges that have come up since then, you can make an argument, well, at least like the state found very recently, could have sprung from the Avangrid merger. They released an audit that has been 3 years in the making with Liberty Consulting Group this year that found that Avangrid itself is not a bad company, but it has really struggled since the merger to be able to provide customer service, largely because has been cutting or limiting some of its resources to meet its earning expectations. The challenge that happened from that was that it created staffing fluctuations, with staff sometimes being cut and then sometimes being restored, which created an uneven expectation of customer service reliability. That investigation really sprang out of some scandal that came out in October 2017 when there was a windstorm where some people lost power for at least a week, and then they received some high bills afterwards, which later led to the Public Utilities Commission in Maine finding that CMP needed to compensate its customers for billing them when they experienced high outages.
Interesting. So recently, Representative Seth Berry, a Maine lawmaker, he wrote an op-ed that was published pretty widely here in New Mexico, warning the state against the merger. Is the company this unpopular in Maine?
Well, certainly, I think any conversation about Avangrid is really a reflection of CMP. That's the local utility. That's the one people are more familiar with. You really see Avangrid coming up in the conversation around the New England Clean Energy Connect, which is a hydropower corridor that is going to bring hydropower electricity down through Maine into Massachusetts and also into the regional grid. But it's happening to fulfill a bid Massachusetts put out to fulfill its renewable energy goals. So when people are talking about Avangrid, they're usually talking about it through the perspective of the corridor, about how this company doesn't care about its share, about the Maine customers, because they're such a small percentage of their earnings overall. There's no guarantee that they're going to have your best interest in mind when it comes to this.
So one of the things that Representative Berry wrote about in his sort of warning to New Mexicans, he mentioned that there's a bill that the Maine legislature has passed to revoke Avangrid's monopoly and replace Central Maine Power with a nonprofit consumer-owned utility. He also wrote that the bill is supported by 75% of Mainers, and that if it became law, it would save ratepayers $9 billion in the first 30 years and accelerate the state's transition to renewable energy. Based on your reporting, is this accurate information? Is this an accurate assessment?
Well, I can't quite speak to how I guess, widespread favorability is for the concept of consumer-owned utility. I would actually say that I don't know that a lot of people know what it would do, but I do know that there was a study that came out that if a consumer-owned utility happened, which in Maine, the concept here is that it would create a nonprofit that would basically then float a bond in order to buy out CMP and Versant Power, which are the two biggest utilities in the state. There's a lot of questions about whether they would be able to sell, and there's actually a competing referendum trying to stop that. But there was a study that came out that said initially rates would increase for the first few years, but then eventually that customers would see possible rate decreases over time.
Here in New Mexico, PNM Resources is like a political powerhouse. Have a great deal of influence in the legislature and over state government. I'm curious, in terms of political influence, kind of what the situation is with CMP and Avangrid in Maine.
Well, certainly CMP and Avangrid have not been shy about flexing some political money around this referendum. The referendum spending altogether is between this one and the first one that was actually struck down for constitutional purposes is over 62 million. And within this quarter alone, Avangrid spent 8.7 million giving to Clean Energy Matters. A lot of that has been spending on, like ads and mailers, and you can make an argument about how useful those can be in a political season, but it's certainly a ways that people like to flex their political forces. They have very powerful influence in Augusta. They have some of the most high-paid lobbying firms that worked to defeat the consumer-owned utility bill. I cannot speak specifically to some of the other bills that they reference on, but that one they were definitely very vocal and very present in.
I'm curious, what questions do you think that people should be asking Avangrid right now to hold the company accountable if the merger goes through and into the future?
So one of the things that really stood out to me in this audit, the Liberty Consulting Group, was when they really just kind of explained how big Avangrid is. It said that its force, which I assume means its workforce, exceeds 35,000, compared to CMP, which has just over 900 people. Made a note of saying that Maine comprises about 20% of U.S. utility operations, but just 2% or so of worldwide Iberdrola utility customers. So if I'm in New Mexico, I would want to ask Avangrid, how are you going to guarantee that you understand our specific energy needs? What are your utility needs? Who are you going to work with to, if there's unsatisfactory customer, like what are you going to do to try to make that better? How well is your understanding of what New Mexico customers need?
Well, Caitlin Andrews, I've really appreciated reading your coverage of utilities in Maine, and I really appreciate you coming on New Mexico in Focus today. Thanks.
Thank you so much.